Today, we are going to be watching a video by Allen Parr called Does God Exist? And if so, how can we know? So let's jump right in and see.
Out of all the videos that I've ever done on this channel, I don't think I've ever answered the question, how can we know for sure that God exists? Rather than hoping that there's a man upstairs or a higher power or a creator or whoever you want to call him, like how can we have some tangible proof that we actually do have a God who exists?
In short, you can't. That's something you could never actually have, or everybody would believe what you do.
The first proof is what we'll call an internal witness. Now, this is the idea that deep down inside of every single human being, there is this deep internal sense that there must be a God who exists. I want you to notice here.
If that's the case, why are there atheists? If that's the case, why doesn't everybody just have an inbuilt idea of God? I mean, people need to be taught about God before they believe in God. People don't just come with an idea of that. It's something they're taught about, usually as children, which I suspect is the case here.
What Paul says about unbelieving Gentiles, not Christians, unbelievers in Romans chapter 1. He says in verse 21, for although they knew God, so let's stop right there. He says that unbelievers, deep down in their spirit, they know God. They know there has to be a God out there somewhere. Now, look at verse 25. What do they do?
Why do I care what Paul thinks? Paul was just some guy who had some opinions. So what? I'm some guy with some opinions. Are you going to take my word as scripture? Well, no, of course not.
Do with it? They exchanged the truth about God for a lie. So at some point, an unbeliever, they know in their heart there's a God. They may not believe in Jesus. They may struggle with this idea of there being a savior on the cross who died and resurrected and miracles and fed 5,000. I get that. Okay, fine. But deep down inside, even unbelievers have a sense that there is a God, and they
No. Also, okay, so he says that unbelievers may have a problem with the idea of a Jesus figure who feeds the 5,000, stuff like that, but still knows that there is a God. Why would that be the case? If you can believe that there's just some magic man that created everything, why can't you believe that there's some guy who is able to, like, multiply food to feed thousands of people? Like, that's not that's not a big leap, is it? I mean, that's a pretty small leap, right? Especially if we're talking about, like, this guy who, like, multiplied the food is supposed to be, like, the son of God, whatever that means. Like, it's not a big leap, is it?
exchange that truth for a lie. Now, how would they know that internally and intrinsically? Well, verse 19 says, since what may be known about God is plain to them. Why? Because God has made it plain to them. So basically,
No, I guess that settles it then. I'm not really an atheist, and I spent all these years just thinking I didn't believe in any of this stuff. Well, thank you, Allen Parr. You've shown me something about myself that I didn't know. Fantastic stuff, man. I don't know why I have to say this, but I feel the need to say I don't care about your book or what it says. Your book is wrong. There we go. It's that simple. If your book was right, there would be nobody who identified as an atheist. There would be no atheists.
Paul is saying, if you just look around, it's very crystal clear that God has done whatever he has needed to do to give every single human being proof of his own existence. He's made it plain. God.
How? How has God made it plain that he exists? I see no evidence of him anywhere in creation. Now, I understand that people who are raised in religion, and sometimes I guess without, have this particular lens through which they see the world, in which they see everything within it as being a sign of the existence of God. However, my lens does not have that. I look around and I just see natural processes. I don't see the hand of God coming down interfering with anything. I don't see any evidence of that.
God has made it so plain that the Bible says in Psalm 14:1, a fool says in his heart there is no God. And so the second proof we'll call.
Okay, so that's not a proof at all. That's just some things a book said. I hate to break it to you, but everybody's got a book. You've got a book, the Jews got a book, the Muslims got a book, Hindus got books, Buddhists got books, Taoists got books, Zoroastrian, everybody's got a book. If you want me to believe your book, you need a good reason for that. And I have yet to see a single good reason to believe any of these books.
Called an external witness. And this is the idea that not only has God placed it in the heart of every person, deep down intrinsically, that they know that there has to be a God somewhere.
Why does this guy exaggerate his facial expressions so much? Like, I gotta break it to you, my guy. We know that isn't just, like, how you talk. Like, you're doing that on purpose. Why? And that's a minor nitpick. I'm not making fun of the guy. I'm just asking, why do you feel the need to do that? This is not an intrinsic trait to make all these faces. It's just, it's like some Jim Carrey stuff. Jim Carrey doesn't just do that cringy stuff with his face. He does that on purpose. Is that what's going on here? Is this some attempt to like entertain us, like Jim Carrey style? Because let me tell you, I'm not entertained by Jim Carrey either.
Out there. But now God has left enough proof externally, specifically in nature, to be able to look around, and anyone with any rational thought should be able to come to the conclusion that, oh, okay, well, because I see this, and because this works this way, and because we have enough sunlight and we have enough rainfall, and the fact that these stars aren't falling down on the ground and the moon and the sun are spinning around.
The fact that these stars aren't falling down on the ground, does this man know what a star is? Does this man know what the stars are? I feel like I've just had like a flashback to like 2,000 years ago when Christians believed that the stars were all like angels poking through or something.
The body heals itself whenever we get cut, and all these different things, right? God says, I've left enough proof for you to know that I exist. He said,
That stuff is proof of that stuff happening. That's not proof of anything outside of that stuff happening. We know why these things happen. We know how the body heals. We have a pretty good idea of it. We know how the sun works. We know how everything you just talked about works to some extent or another. Maybe not completely, but to some extent, we know how these things work. But I guess if you're the type of person who thinks that the stars can literally fall out of the sky, you probably don't have a great grasp of how things work, so I guess I understand why he thinks this stuff is evidence. No, I would encourage Allen Parr, instead of viewing all of this stuff as miraculous, maybe become educated on how these things work the way they do, and you'll discover soon that there is no hand of God coming down to interact with the universe. This is just essentially an argument from his own ignorance, which is, I don't know how things work, therefore God. But we do know how these things work, therefore, no, not really. Learn about it, learn the science. It's fascinating stuff, and I do feel like religion is most often what somebody puts in the place where they don't have understanding of how things actually work. I hate to argue from authority, but look at the majority of people who study these things, scientists who study biology and astronomy and stuff like that. They are usually not religious. There's a reason for that.
says once again in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's, here it is, invisible qualities, number one, his eternal power, number two, and divine nature, number three, have been what? Clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. God says, listen, when you stand before me one day, I get the fact that you may struggle with understanding who Jesus is and him dying on the cross, but you won't be able to stand before God one day and say, well, God, I just didn't know that you existed, right? He's left enough proof so that man will be without excuse.
Okay, so I don't think that's how that works. I mean, first of all, it says invisible qualities. How can invisible qualities be seen exactly? Isn't that in itself a contradiction? Secondly, I've read this book a time or two. I understand it pretty well. I don't think merely the understanding that a God exists, in at least this man's religion, is what gets you in the doors. I don't think St. Peter is going to be like, okay, so you think God is real, therefore heaven. I don't think that's how it works. I mean, the book itself has some pretty strong, um, things to the contrary of that particular opinion. But that is a very curious, if he's saying what I think he's saying, that is a very curious take on the Bible, which tells me I don't think this man has actually read his Bible very well either. He may not know how science works, but it appears he also doesn't know how the Bible works, because it seems like to this man, if you believe in God, any kind of God, you get into heaven. But that's not what his book says. Has he read his book? I am not certain if he has read his book.
Okay, so now these next four proofs are what we'll call the traditional proofs that people have given over hundreds of years, centuries of years. And the first one we'll look at is what's called the cosmological argument. And this word comes from the idea of cosmos, or the universe. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read an excerpt from Wayne Grudem's systematic theology book, which
I really wish they'd come up with some new arguments. I mean, geez, we've heard these 100, 1,000 times probably, right?
which describes it in this way. He says, every known thing in the universe has a cause. Therefore, it reasons the universe itself must also have a cause.
That second one is a pretty big assumption there. Every known thing in the universe has a cause. Okay, that's correct enough. Therefore, it reasons the universe itself must also have a cause. Why? I mean, if there is a chain of causes originating from the Big Bang, that does not mean the Big Bang itself had to have a cause. That does not necessarily flow. Now, to our human logic, it does seem the case that would be so. But we don't really have any proof of that. So we're going with an if here. This goes from being a yeah, probably to kind of like a well, maybe, which is a big problem for these kinds of arguments. These arguments rely on too many ifs. They have so many they're relying on so many things we don't have answers to. You may as well just be making the assertion outright. But let's continue.
And the cause of such a great universe can only be God. Now,
Again, another assumption. That's saying, well, so there must be a cause. The universe must have a cause. We don't know that for sure. And if the universe has a cause, it must be God, which is just another grand leap of logic that we don't. Now, that could be the case. It could be so. Could be. That's not really a solid argument, in my opinion.
Now, let me just kind of break that down in layman's terms. Let's just say we have this phone right here. Well, as we look at this phone had to have a cause of some sort. Something had to cause this phone to be here, right? Or this cup right here, or these glasses right here. Something had to cause this to come into existence. And so if we keep tracing the cause back and say, okay, well, what caused the plastic to be on this set of glasses? Okay, then what caused the plastic to be able to be created, or what caused the resistors in here to be able to be created? And we keep tracing that cause and that cause back to that cause. And who caused that? What caused that? We're basically going to end up with a universe with nothing in it except stars, sun, moon, or whatnot. And then
No, I mean, that's if you go back a certain amount, but I must say we are also in that universe currently, where it's just, stars and star stuff, essentially. But no, you can go further back than that. I don't know if he's going to. It sounded like he wasn't, but it also sounded like he was going for like a watchmaker argument kind of thing. He may be going for that soon enough, though, so.
And at this point, we have two options. Option one, God caused the universe that we have today. If you get to that conclusion that God is the source and the cause of everything, then you've already gotten to the place that you need to be. Now,
Place that you need to be? Well, what do you mean need to be? I wasn't aware that you needed to arrive at that conclusion specifically. That's an odd one to say you need to be there. Weird choice of words.
the other possibility in terms of how we got our universe is this idea of the Big Bang Theory.
I mean, it's not an idea. It happened. We have evidence for it. Mountains, we have evidence for the Big Bang and none for God. So it seems pretty clear that if those are your two options, option two wins by default. We know it happened. If you're arguing that it's either God or the Big Bang, you got a problem. We know the Big Bang happened.
But then you're stuck there because if you go with that route, then you have to come up with some sort of conclusion or explanation, if you will, on what caused the Big Bang. And then you have to come up with the explanation of who was the person who actually caused it. And then
No, you don't. You don't have to have any of that stuff. You can just say, I don't know what happened, and I don't think you know either. That simple. I don't have to have an explanation for everything in the universe. Why should I have to have an explanation for everything in the universe? Granted, I think there are good ones, but I don't know for sure. And I don't think you know either, buddy.
and who was the person who created the two things or however many things that came.
Why has it got to be a person? Do people create everything? Because we have a pretty clear chain in the cosmos of nature creating things. We can see it happening. We can see the universe creating things right before our very eyes. We have observed, for example, protoplanetary disks being created. We have observed stars being born. We have observed these things. These things happen in our universe. We can look at nature and see animals being born. We can look at these things. We can see these things happening. There's no person behind those things. That's the natural laws, the universal laws doing these things.
Came together to make the Big Bang. And so if you keep tracing those things back, you'll ultimately get back to there has to be a cause for this. And that cause is God, who we call the uncaused cause.
I would even grant you that there has to be a cause. Now, do I think that's necessarily the case? Well, no. I think causes are something that happens in this universe. So, however that got here, may not have needed what we call a cause. I mean, this may have always been here in some form or another. There's plenty of ideas like that. I see no reason why that couldn't be the case. But let's assume I did grant that the Big Bang had to have a cause as such. Why couldn't it have been something natural? Why does it have to be something supernatural? Even if I grant your premise that there had to be a cause, that does not automatically lead me to the cause that you want it to be.
Okay, so the fourth argument is called the teleological argument, and that comes from the word telos, which is from the idea of end or purpose. Now, this
I know I'd like to get to the end of this video.
argument, basically, I'm going to read back from Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology book, and he says it focuses on the evidence of harmony, order, and design in the universe, and argues that its design gives evidence of an intelligent purpose. So
Well, we see no design, though. I mean, like, we see no evidence of design. The universe is very chaotic and seemingly random to all appearances from us. Now, human society, for example, is something that's pretty ordered, but even there lies chaos, and that's probably about as ordered as almost anything in the universe gets from a human-centered perspective. We look around and we see stars exploding and catastrophic supernovas probably destroying entire solar systems, maybe some that are inhabited even. I mean, granted, that would be hard for a lot of solar systems because, like, obviously supernovas are happening very quickly in most stars that have them, but I guess there could be some situation where, like, what is it, a type, 1A supernova happens and just, like, destroys a civilization or something like that. It could be the case. I'm not saying it is. It could be the case. It's a very chaotic universe. There are black holes that probably wander into some unfortunate solar systems and just obliterate them. There are black holes that are like super active and just like sterilizing entire galaxies more or less, that shoot out massive jets that are probably sterilizing some unfortunate worlds. These things are chaotic and random. The human body, they always point to the human body as having like some special design feature, but I mean, the way the human body works, it's not a very efficient design if it is designed. It gives you the sense that the designer must be drunk. Like, what makes a design a good design? Well, it's simplicity, it's effectiveness. Does it work? And does it work simply? I mean, think about glasses. You could take a pair of glasses and make them a whole hell of a lot more complicated, and some people have. You could do that. But this design is very simple and very functional. It gets done what it needs to do. Now, the fact that I even have to wear glasses at all, because from this distance, I mean, the computer is like, the screen is like a little bit more than an arm's length away. From this distance, my eyesight is so bad, Allen Parr is blurry. I've had bad eyesight for as long as I can remember. That's a bad design. If all it takes is something this simple to fix it, that's a big problem for the designer, isn't it?
the idea of this is one I love. Basically, the idea is if you look at the universe that we have today, it necessitates that there had to be an intelligent design.
And yet, once more, the people who know the most about the universe and how it works, scientists, are the least likely of probably all groups out there to believe in God. Curious, isn't it? The casual person who doesn't know anything about how this stuff works is like, well, shit, must be Jesus. Scientists who actually spend their lives studying all of this stuff, deeply studying all of this stuff, they are the ones who are like, yeah, I don't see him. It doesn't seem to be here. Maybe he's hiding under that rock. Nope, not there either. Shit.
Or designer, that everything that we see didn't just come from happenstance, right? The sun being in a position that it is, it's not just happen.
What do you mean the sun being in the position it is? The sun is moving. I don't know if you know, the sun is moving. Does he think of course he thinks the sun is stationary, doesn't he? Oh, Christ.
It doesn't just happen to be there. If it was further away, we would freeze up. If it was closer, we would burn up. There is a
No, wrong. False. The average distance between the sun and the earth is what, like 93 million miles? But that's only an average. We swing closer to it and further away. Our orbit is not perfectly circular. Now, there is a habitable zone that we fall in the range of. But oh God, I hate doing this, but we got to do it. Let's talk about numbers, folks. Here we go. So, just so you know, we have found a lot of planets outside of the solar system. They're called exoplanets. They're outside of the solar system. We've found something like almost 6,000 of those. And as far as I'm aware, about 1% of those planets are in the habitable zones of their stars. Now, if 1% of the planets in the entire galaxy are in the habitable zones of their stars, that's about 10 billion planets in this galaxy alone. That's a conservative estimate, I would imagine. But let's just say about 10 billion, because they're probably somewhere in the realm of at least a trillion, maybe 2 trillion planets in our galaxy. Now, there are something like 500 billion to 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. In the whole universe, beyond what we can merely see, there may be as much as 250 times as much stuff out there. So we're talking 10 billion times anywhere from 500 billion to 2 trillion times 255. That is a very large number of planets in the habitable zones of their stars, just like us. We're not that special. I mean, we are kind of special. We're 1 in 100. But we're not that special.
There's an intelligent design that placed that sun right in the ideal situation.
The sun is not placed in the ideal situation, even if it is an ideal. The Earth is the thing that's in the ideal position, but that's only 1 in 100 were the chances of that. Besides that, habitable zones aren't the only places life can emerge. Maybe not even the only places intelligent life could emerge. You could see it being the case that could happen around like moons of what are they called? The giant planets, the gas giants. That could happen on moons around gas giants, for example. That could have happened on Mars. Mars just is a dead planet now, but it could have been alive for some time. Venus, similarly, but Venus has other problems. I would say being outside of what we consider to be the habitable zones is probably not that big of an issue as long as either you're not too far outside of it, or alternatively, if you're around like a gas giant, for example. There's plenty of ways life could emerge. This is just one of them. This is not the perfect situation. It's perfect for our particular forms of life, and the reason is we evolved to these conditions.
Intelligent design that knows just how much rainfall needs to come down on this earth, where if it's too much, we'll drown. If it's not enough, we won't be able to survive. There's an intelligence going on.
Bro, I hate to break it to you. I really do. Some places flood constantly. Jakarta, Indonesia. I can't even say anything today. But yeah, Jakarta, Indonesia. They have floods constantly. The Midwest, they have tornadoes all the time. A lot of rain comes down in those places. I mean, floods are the number one killer of people as far as natural disasters go in the entire world. You are more likely to be killed by a flood than any other kind of natural disaster. I hate to break it to you, but there are whole areas of this planet that are extremely arid and receive almost no rain at all. Places that receive what he terms a perfect amount of rain are going to be far and few between. And what is a perfect amount of rain anyway? What is the ideal amount of rain exactly? I don't see. That's the thing about like, what are the standards we're going by here for this? Like, what is the perfect amount of rain for what exactly? Come on, my guy, clue me in here. Don't just say these things, but. He doesn't know what he's talking about, so of course he can't. He's just kind of like making shit up. I mean, this is not. Again, I really hate to like insult people, so I'm not trying to insult Allen Parr by any means. What I'm saying is, out of all the videos I've seen by him, he does not come off as an extremely bright man.
That's sustaining everything. Now let's break it down into simpler terms. Let's once again go back to the cell phone. This cell phone is made of batteries, resistors, capacitors, and who knows what else. Plastic, if you will, whatever. So if I just take
plastic, if you will. He's getting fancy on us. Oh my.
A whole bunch of parts from a store, if you will, Radio Shack. I get a whole bunch of parts, batteries, resistors, and I throw them all in this cup. And I just shake them up, right? I'm not going to be able to take all those parts out and, whoa, pops a cell phone that I can.
This was, that airplane tornado in a junkyard making an airplane thing. which is just a terrible example, and it doesn't even have anything to do with what he's talking about specifically. I don't, at least how he phrases it. I mean, here is a guy who doesn't understand the arguments he is making. He is just making them. The associations he's making here are just complete nonsense. He read about this stuff on Wikipedia. Then he read about some, I guess probably some apologist articles, and it all became like a jumbled mess in his head. So he's kind of like mixing up the arguments here a little bit. Just mixing and matching and just throwing. Yeah, it's pretty silly stuff, isn't it?
Can call people all across the world, right? It doesn't work like that, right? So this idea of just throwing things together and causing them to bang together doesn't necessarily result, or it will not result in something that is going to work, right? So the idea is,
Well, we can already prove that wrong. I mean, there are big clouds of gas and dust, and those big clouds of gas and dust should, by all means, be inert, right? But yet, we see these clouds of gas and dust creating new stars and star systems. These are emergent properties. It's really not that difficult to understand, but I guess to somebody like this, it's damn near impossible.
is that as we look at our world, as we look at even childbirth, how our how babies are born, the miracle of childbirth, and all sorts of other things, there has to be an intelligent designer that is behind all these things that are making it work. Now,
Babies, therefore Jesus. That's a certainly an argument you can make, I guess.
the fifth argument is what's called the moral argument. And this is the idea that basically inherent in every single person who has ever existed is this idea of right and wrong. Now, do some people go against their own conscience and do wrong? Of course, we all do. But inherently, let's be honest, we all have a common sense of certain things being right and certain things being wrong.
No, we all don't. In fact, there's what's called sociopaths, psychopaths, people with what's called antisocial personality disorder. They don't know, they don't care. It turns out what tells us, what gives us some inherent sense, as far as we can tell, of right and wrong, is empathy. It's we would not want bad things to happen to us, therefore, we don't want bad things to happen to another person. Yes, we did evolve to care about other humans. Because if we didn't, the species wouldn't have survived. Humanity is a largely collaborative, community building species. We evolved to be that. We had to have some sense of it's bad to kill people, it's bad to steal things from other people. We had to have that, much like birds, after laying, certain birds, I guess, maybe not all, had to have the sense that after they lay eggs, they have to sit on those eggs for a while, just chill with them. Um, if you don't have these senses, you're probably not going to make it very long as a species. So yes, we have some ingrained sense of what we should and should not do to each other, but morals vary so widely between cultures and religions, and even within the same religion, and just everybody's got a different set of morals, right? No two people have morals that are exactly identical. We all have slightly different ones. If there were a God putting them in there, I mean, if there was like an objectively right set of morals, one set like, let's say, the Ten Commandments, every human should have that exact same set. But we don't. Some don't have any set at all. And most humans have some inherent set to some extent when they get older. Although, really, I'm not convinced that it is really that inherent because think about babies. Babies are little psychopaths. Whether you love them or hate them, babies are psychopaths. So, in a sense, maybe as they grow up, they start to develop empathy and stuff, but it's really hard to say, isn't it, whether that's your parents doing that, or your society instilling that, or whether that's just something that comes about as a result of the development process. Regardless, morals are different. Everybody has different morals. If there were a God implanting morals inside of all of us, like some weird alien, you'd expect those morals to match up, but they don't.
We understand that it is wrong to molest a child. We understand that it is wrong to take the innocent life of somebody. We understand all these things are.
Some people don't, though. Some people just genuinely do not understand it. I've talked about this before. I have a family member who has a certain let's say, thing for children. And yes, he paid the price for it. And he's probably going to pay even more prices for it. But he still thinks it's wrong to be gay and bisexual and trans. And, apparently, I don't know this firsthand because I won't talk to the bastard, but The guy will go on rants to people about how the queers are grooming our children. My brother in Christ, you did that. That was you. Now I just want I bring this up because he was asked like in court whether he thought what he did was wrong or not, and he said society sees it as wrong, other people think it's wrong, but it didn't feel wrong. I think that's pretty telling right there. I mean, I think there are definitely a lot of people in his shoes who would have been like, "Oh, yep, felt bad about that," but there's a lot of people like him who just don't give a shit. And still somehow think it's wrong to be gay. So yeah, people are all over the place, dude.
Are wrong. Where did that come from? Where did this idea of this is right and no, 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 this is wrong come from? It had to have come from God, because if it didn't come from God, then that means that every single person on earth would have their own separate standard of morality versus there being a general common morality that is shared amongst all human beings, and that could have only come from a morally perfect being, i.e.
I don't know if this man actually like goes to church, but I'll just be generous and assume the answer is yes. So let's say he goes to church. It's a big church, 1,000 members, something, maybe 10,000, maybe it's a mega church. I'd say let's do a test about this. Let's go to that church and hand out questionnaires with like 100 questions on morality. How many people that answer it voluntarily do you think would have the exact same answers for all 100 questions? I would say they'd probably all have different answers. I'd say the chances of getting somebody, two people alone, just two people that have the same exact answers, I'd say that'd be damn near impossible, wouldn't it? I mean, we'll never know until we try, but maybe that's a study somebody should do. I assume somebody's already done something like that, but my point is, you're wrong, Alan.
God. Okay, and the sixth and final proof is a difficult one to wrap your mind around, and it's the ontological argument. And the idea here is, if you can imagine some great maximal being, if you will, right? If you can imagine that being in your mind that can do all these things, that's all powerful, all knowing, that is all sovereign and in control of all things. But if that being only exists in your mind and you're only able to just imagine him, but he doesn't really exist, then that means by default, he can't be the maximum being, i.e. God. There has to be another being out there that is greater than the one that you've actually imagined, because now this being not only exists in your consciousness, but also exists actually in reality as well. And so
This is by far the worst argument that they bring up regularly. You know, see, if you've never heard this one before, somehow you might think, well, this guy is misunderstanding the argument. And really, he's not. He actually seems to have nailed this one. Now, is his way of describing it the best? Well, I would say not. But did he get the idea? Yes, he did get the idea. It is exactly as ridiculous as it sounds. It essentially boils down to, I think, therefore God is, which is really silly. I mean, I must digress. The whole thing is just, obviously the whole thing is silly, but like, this argument in specific, if I can think it, well, then there must be something greater than my thoughts about it. So if I can think of an invisible pink unicorn, there must be a greater invisible pink unicorn outside of my thoughts, right? There must be a greater one. Yeah, it is. I mean, you might think, oh, well, you're just being flippant, and I am, but I think the whole argument is flippant.
So therefore, there has to be a greater God. If there, basically the argument is this: if you can imagine that there is a possibility of there being a God, then that means there has to exist the fact that there is a God. Yeah, I know. That's a tough one to wrap your mind around. I get it. Okay, my friends, so there.
No, it's not. It's just stupid. Like, that's it. It's just a stupid argument. But thanks for that, Allen Parr, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great one.